Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Nun Dalid in Maseches Zevachim. We are in the middle of the fifth chapter. We are dealing, let me share my screen and we will get started. We are concluded the day yesterday by explaining that the base of the altar does not go across the southern and eastern sides of the altar because that real estate belongs to the tribe of Yehuda, and the whole of the altar and its base is supposed to be in the property of the tribe of Binyamin. So as we pick up on the fifth line from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Bet, third to last word on the line, Amar Rabbi Levi. The Gemara continues to discuss the border between Yehuda and Bin Yamin. So, Amar Rabbi Levi bar Chama, Amar Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina. So, Rabbi Levi said in the name of Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, that Ritzua Haisa Yotzah Michel Koshel Yehuda. There was a strip of land that went out from Yehuda's portion, v'nichnesa b'chelko shel Binyamin, and went into Binyamin's portion, and that was the strip that we're talking about right now. V'haya Binyamin hatzadik mitzdayer aleha b'chol yom linotla, and every day Binyamin, the righteous Binyamin, was very upset about it, that he wanted to try and take it. He wanted to have it so that the on some level the mizbeach could be symmetrical, or on some level that it would be an expansion of the mizbeach to include that space. Shenemar, how do I know that in fact that Binyamin was concerned about that? So as we turn to Nadalad Amud Aleph, Chofef Alav Kol Hayom. He agonized over it every day. Lefikach, this is of course a quote from Moshe's blessing of Binyamin at the end of Sefer Devarim. Lefikach, and that's why, because he had that desire to have the all of the uh, uh, Mizbeach be in his space. So that's why Binyamin Lefikach Zacha Binyamin Hatzadik Binasa Ushpizkan LaHakadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why he was able to be the sort of host, the innkeeper, the host of Hashem's spirit. Namely, the simplest understanding of that is that's why he was able to be the Kodesh Hakodashim was in Binyamin's space, land. And that's consistent with what the Torah says, that that between the shoulders does God rest. And so the idea is that's the specific location of the Beit Hamikdash. So Meisvei, 1 second. I'm gonna challenge this because you're telling me that there was no base. We've been saying all along that there's no base at the southeastern corner. But listen to the following. Now, it's important to understand that this is an paraphrasing of the Mishnah, and so of a Mishnah that's on Daf uh, Samech Samech Dalid Amud Aleph, and that this Mishnah, Samech Dalid Bet, excuse me, and let me just and so we'll go through it and we'll incorporate some of the aspects that are going to be discussed later. But Olas Ha'of Ketzad Haisa Nasis. How was the Ola for a bird done? Okay, so if you made an ola offering from a bird, hayamolek esro. And so the first by the step that's omitted in our Gemara here is that you would go up the ramp, you would turn to the right, you would come to the southeastern corner because again, we would always go around the altar counterclockwise, and hayamolek es rosha mimul or pa, and you would do Malika in that southeastern corner. Well, 1 second, umavdil, and you would separate the head from the rest of the body. Umimatza dama al kir hamizbeach, and you would squeeze out blood on the wall of the altar. So um, now the issue is, so that's the sort of quotation. Again, it's not quite exactly the language of the Mishnah on Daf Samach Dalan and Bet, but in any event, that's the quotation that we're using here. The amrat lo haya la yesod. Now we comment. If you tell me that there was no yesod there, well, then the blood that would be squirting out from the bird at that corner would likely end up falling on the ground and not on the and not on any aspect of the mizbeach. Ba'avira ba'almahu deka'avid. It would be simply in the air, as Rashi says. Um, uh, let's take a look at the Rashi last of the Y lines at the top of Rashi. Umimatse midama. So we'll skip the parenthetical. That what would you do? You would squeeze out the bird. So dochek base malika. So you would push the place where the malika had happened, namely the neck, lakir, against the wall. V'hu mitmatzeh al yedei doko bekir, and it would squeeze out through the pressure against the wall. V'lakaman amrinan, and we will see in the future in the further discussion that where does the one need to do this? Sha'al keren mizrachis deromis. One is doing this on the southeastern corner. Hina says you're doing this. The ein la yesod. Now, if in fact there is no yesod underneath it, Nimsa, we'll find out what will end up happening. Kishahu molka, when he does the malika and cutting off of the head of the bird with his thumbnail, ba'avir, and he's doing it in the air, he nimleket, he's doing it, that's how he does it. B'hadam nofel la'aretz, the blood that squirts out is going to fall on the ground. Li'ibud, and it will go to waste. And we're not supposed to have that blood go to waste. That blood needs to be used. And so as a result, it needs to be put on the Mizbeach. And so as a result, it can't be that we would allow the blood of the Malika to get wasted through its falling to the ground. Because if there was a Yesod there, well then fine, it would fall on the Yesod, and that would be fine because that's blood can go on the Yesod. Now, the Im Tomer, Nofel al Hasovev. Well, 1 second, where is this person standing? He's on the ledge, okay, which is 6 amas up from the base, from the bottom of the base. It's 6 amas up on the excuse me, please. It's 6 amas up on the altar, and so if he does it in the air, won't everything fall straight onto the sovev itself, which is considered part of the altar? And so shouldn't that be okay? Shaharei lamala hi ne'eset, because that's made up a high. Hakatani hasam asa lamata lemiraglav afilu ama achat kshera. But the issue is that because the ledge was 6 amas high, and the blood of an Ola bird, which needs to go above the line, it could go even 1 amma below the ledge. Because again, the ledge is 6 ammas up. The midline is 5 ammas up. So there's 1 amma below the ledge where one has the ability to do the pressure. And if one does that, does the malika in the airspace right opposite that, then there is no base below it, and there is no ledge below it because you're reaching down from the ledge. And so as a result, it would, and yet it kashera, it doing it there would be kosher. Delo kapid ella alamala minachut, because the key aspect of where the blood gets put is that it be above the red line, chut haskira. And so as a result, that's going to And so as a result, if one were to reach down and do the malika opposite the wall that is up to 1 amma below the ledge, which is a fine place to rub the blood, to put the blood of this ola, you'll end up cutting the head off in a location where the blood is likely to fall on the ground and go to waste. So that can't be. So that's the question. So
Why it says kasher though? It would be I feel
it would be
I'm
it would be kasher to apply the blood there. But the result of the applying of the blood there, which is kasher, is that blood would fall on the ground and go to waste. So we must be missing something, the Gemara is saying.
Why would it fall on the ground if it sticks? If you put it on the one puts it on the altar and it's on the altar.
Because before one puts the presses the neck of the bird against the altar, the one does the malika, and the malika cuts the head off, and the head and blood will fall from that location straight down and cause and result in blood going onto the ground and not on the altar. That's the question, according
Mhm.
to Rashi. According to Tosos, it's a little bit different, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Well, why
So,
does Rashi mention shtei simanim here? Well,
because
mavdil b'shtei simanim b'lo ka'achat shehi siman achad.
Okay, so that is because when it comes to there's a difference between an ola from an oaf and a chatas from an oaf. When it comes to the chatas from an oaf, you only have to cut one of the simanim. When you do the ola from the oaf, you have to eat. There's a machlokes among Rishonim whether it means that you literally have to cut the whole head off, which of course means cutting both of the simanim, or whether you just have to cut the both simanim. So that's the discussion. That's why he's referencing that here in terms of shtei simanim. But that's the chata. That's you're referring to the Rashi, the second line b'shtei simanim. That's what you're going to have to separate. That's referring to the fact that you have to cut two simanim below kechatas, unlike a bird chatas shehi b'siman achad, which is done by cutting just one siman. So anyway, so that's what that's referring to. All right, but
Mm.
so again, the question is that if you were to lean down, according to Rashi, and try to be ready to put the bird's blood below the ledge that the Kohen is standing on, which is a legitimate location to put the blood, you're going to end up where the malika is going to cause blood to fall onto the ground, and so that can't be. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Kach Hitnu Avira de Binyamin Karka de Yehuda. No, they had an agreement, and the agreement is that although the ground was Binyamin's space, the ground was Yehuda's space, the air above it was Binyamin's. And so they could look at the Rashi, Omer Kach, so Ve'ika Lamemar, Lamala Migimel. So what you can say is the following: above Migimel, above 3 tfachim, because we treat anything that is below 3 tfachim as if it's part of the ground. Delav karkahu, anything that's above 3 tfachim, so it's not considered the ground any longer. Asui kimin blita, they had a little projection that would stick out. Kitana, a small one. Keneged ota keren, right by that corner. Likabel ba dam olataof, and on that little ledge, that would catch any of the blood of the bird, of an ola bird, shalo yipola aret, so it wouldn't fall on the ground. The kir mizbeach mikri, and although that was a horizontal ledge, it was considered the wall of the mizbeach. Aval yesod lo mikri, but that ledge would not be considered a base, lahakshir hakeren, in order to permit doing blood ola, large animal ola applications there. Lematan damim hatzrichen lunatain keneged hayesod, for applying blood when you needed to apply blood opposite a base. She'ein yisod ela hamiyused ba'aretz, because anything that would be considered a base has to be based in the ground. And so as a result, it would be alleged to address that, but not for that, but not to address the blood, but not be a base. Now, that is how Rashi understands this question and answer. Tosfos has some problems with it. And so, as a result, we'll go to the bottom of the Tosfos V'i Amrat Lo Haya Lo Yesod, where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up. Last word on the line, Venera. We're going to pick up with Rabbeinu Tam's understanding. Venera le Rabbeinu Tam, Deparech Mimelika Atzma. The question is not about the blood falling on the ground. Rather, the question is about doing the Malika in airspace that belongs to Yehuda and not Binyamin. Debai birosho shel mizbeach, because that Malika needs to be done over the airspace of the altar. Dumya de Haktara, because the Malika is considered like the Haktara, like the burning of the body of the animal, of the large animal. Come on, as we are going to see. And if you did this in the airspace of Yehuda, imkain ena ola l'kadshei mizbeach. It couldn't be an ola that would be sanctified by the mizbeach. So that's the question. The question isn't about the blood falling on the ground. It's about if you again you can do the malika opposite the space that is 1 amma up to 1 amma below the ledge, because it just needs to be above the red line, and so as a result, that's going to be that's going to be in the airspace, because beneath that there's no base. Beneath that is the land of Yehuda. And so you're going to be doing that potentially in the airspace of Yehuda. And that's a problem, because we need to be in the airspace of Binyamin, and specifically over the altar, to be treated as being an Ola. Umishani, and so therefore the Gemara answers, Da'avira de Binyamin, that it's not that airspace is considered Binyamin. The Kaddish Ha'avir b'Kedushas Mizbeach, and that airspace has the Kedusha of the Mizbeach, even though it's not literally over the Mizbeach. The agreement is that that space was sanctified, and therefore that was the question, and that was the answer that we had. Okay,
So
so
that's on the other side. It's not the southeast side. It has to
no,
be
no,
what?
southeast side. All this is on the southeast side, southeast corner.
But that's the area of Yehuda, right?
The answer is that the ground is Yehuda, but the airspace above that ground belongs to Binyamin. That's the answer. That's the answer that we give, is that even in that southeast corner where there is no foundation, there is no base, because the land belongs to Yehuda. Even though there is no base, the airspace above that ground is considered Binyamin. And therefore, either according to Rashi, there can be a ledge in that space and the blood will fall on that ledge, or according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's airspace of Binyamin, and therefore doing the Malika in that location is considered sanctifying of an Ola offering, and therefore a valid action.
But it says, but Rabbeinu Tosfos said, "Ve'i avid le ba'avir de Yehuda," right?
Yes, that's the question. Because our Hava Amina was that this was the land, this is over the land of Yehuda, and therefore it would be Yehuda's airspace also, and therefore it would
Right.
not be a valid carbon. And so the answer is that, and that's exactly what the Gemara answers, right? Back into the Gemara, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down, middle of the line, Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Amar kach hitnu. This is what the condition. This was how they agreed. Avira de Binyamin, karka de Yehuda. It's the airspace of Binyamin, but the land of Yehuda. Okay,
But
so
how do you understand then if we have air, in modern world, if you have a building, the airspace belongs to that building. If we have the
Not
ground of
necessarily,
Yehuda,
not necessarily. Nowadays, we understand that the different elements of ownership. In fact, this is this is this is just another example of where, Jewish law was way ahead. Because you're absolutely right. For much of history, when you owned the ground, you owned everything up and everything down. That is not the case today. You can separate the ownership. Indeed, for example, right, um, the Bayit sold some of its airspace in order for the atria to be built. Now that's a little bit different. It's not over the atria, but you can see in many cities how you'll have a smaller building and above it will be a larger building that is actually over its airspace, and that's because its airspace was purchased by the taller building. No, most definitely you can have separate the ownership of the airspace to the ownership of the land underneath. Okay. And of course, the reverse goes true too. There are many places where people sell the mineral rights of the underneath the ground and keep the rights associated with having structures above the ground. Okay.
but
In
we
any
did
event,
talk about the halal going straight up to Shemayim, right?
what
Well, I
halal?
mean, the space going over a building, over a place,
Yeah.
over land,
Yeah.
going right up to Shemayim. Right there's that concept.
Oh, 100%. And if you don't explicitly change it, the baseline is that when you buy real estate, you own everything up to Shemayim and everything down to essentially the core of the earth.
Uh-huh.
So the 100%, that's the case. But what the Gemara is telling us is that here specifically they made an agreement that the airspace would be Binyamin. Okay.
All
So
right.
my lo havala yisod. We have been assuming for sure that when we say that there's no yisod, we mean it very literally, that there's no base there whatsoever. But yet, even though we've essentially assumed that for the entire Maseches up to this point, turns out that that's actually a machlokas. Rav Amar, so my lo hava lo yisod. What do we mean that there's no base in the southeastern corner? Rav Amar Bivinian, that there's nothing there structurally. So it's meant very literally. Levi Amar Bidamim. And Levi says, no, it does not mean that it's nothing there structurally. There was actually a base there. As Rashi tells us, this is from the bottom of the narrow lines in Rashi. It's 15 lines up. Omer bidamim yisod. So what do we say? So he says, Levi says it's by talking about the blood. Yisod haya al pnei kol hamizbech. Really, there was a base that went around the entire al pnei kol hamizrach, that went around the entire mizbeach and was on the eastern side. Aval lo nostin damim bechelko shel Yehuda. But what we mean by there's no base is that from a legal perspective, from an application of the blood perspective, you're not allowed to put the blood on the base that is in the southeastern corner because it's not treated like a base of the rest of the altar because it's in Yehuda. So that's the machlokus. We are now going to try. Oh, and what's the basis of that machlokus? Rav Mitargem, when it comes to the language of Binyamin Ze'ev Yitraf, that Rav has understands it and interprets it using the following Aramaic phrase: "Ba'achasante yispene midbacha." That in fact, that in his inheritance, in Binyamin's inheritance, the Yitbene, it'll be built, midbacha meaning the Mizbeach, the altar. So he understood that Binyamin Ze'ev Yitraf is a reference to the altar itself being built in Binyamin. And because all of the altar needs to be in Binyamin, therefore none of the base could possibly be in Yehuda. Whereas Levi Metargim, Levi understood these words, Binyamin Ze'ev Yitraf, as Ba'achasante in his inheritance, Yispene Mikdasha, that the Mikdash will be built. and it makom mikudash l'damim. And what it means is that specifically all it could have structure outside, physical structure outside of Binyamin, but when it comes to the holiness of that structure, the holiness of that structure would be limited to Binyamin's property, and therefore there was a base on the southeastern corner, but that base on the southeastern corner was not holy enough to put the blood. And so, therefore, from a technical perspective or from a legal perspective, it's not treated like the rest of the base. And so that's the perspective. So now we're going to try 4 times to figure out whether Rav is correct or Levi is correct. And to telegraph where we'll end up is that we don't successfully make a proof in either direction. Tashma, first we're going to try to prove to support Rav. Hayesod haya mahalech al pnei kol hatzafon. There was a base that went the entire northern side. The al pnei kol hamarab. And similarly, it went on the entire western side. And ochel b'darom ama achat. It went 1 amma into the southern side of the Mizbeach, uva mizrach amma achat, and it went 1 amma into the eastern side of Mizbeach. Again, if you take a look at Rashi, the Rashi in the bottom left-hand corner of Nun Gimel Amud Bet, you can see exactly what we're talking about. That shows, right, the base is what is around the Ma'arav and the Tzafon, and you can see that 1 little amma goes into the Mizrach, and 1 little amma goes into the Darom. And so that's what we're talking about. That's what this Mishnah that is in where is this Mishnah? This Mishnah is in Midot, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Aleph, that this Mishnah seems to support Rav. So the Gemara answers, no, it doesn't have to support Rav. My ochel, what does it mean that it goes in and it eats a little bit? Nami b'damim. It also means only with respect to the blood. The point is that the first amma of it could have blood put on it. But the rest of that base, yes, it still did continue. Meaning, again, according to Levi, the picture in the bottom left corner of Rashi on Nun Gimel Amud Bet is incorrect. It really should go all the way around, and it should continue so that it fully circles the Mizbeach. And the point is that it's just this is what's shown in Rashi is the literal location of where you're allowed to put the blood. Okay, so first proof effort to try and prove Rav's correct fails. Tashma. Now we're going to try 3 times to support Levi and to contradict Rav.
Did you just say that according to Levi, one could put the blood on anywhere around the Mizbeach? Or no?
No, I did not say that. I
misunderstood what you said.
No. Again, there was a base all the way around the Mizbeach, but you can only put the blood in the location shown in Rashi on Nun Gimel Amud Bet.
Okay.
All right. So Tashma, we're going to bring another proof. This time we're going to try to contradict Rav and prove Levi. Hamizbeach, and it's actually from the same Mishnah, Mishnah Perek Gimel, Mishnah Aleph in Midot. Hamizbeach haya shloshim ushtayim al shloshim ushtayim. It was a 32 amma by 32 amma mizbeach. Well, what's the implication of that? Rashi tells us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi on Nundalet Amud Aleph. Al shloshim ushtayim. Kashya l'Rav. This is difficult for Rav. Demashma ribuahaya, because that implies that it was a full a literal square. And so as a result, if it was a literal square, the 32 amos includes the base. And so as a result, if in fact it was a full 32 by 32, well, then there must have been base all the way around the altar. So no, minatzad. No, if you measure it from the side, namely, if you measure it on the western side and the northern side, well, then you would get 32 by 32. But if you measure it on the southern side or the eastern side, well, then you wouldn't get 32. It would be just 31. But we're just talking about the large measurement, the largest possible measurement on two particular sides. So no, I haven't contradicted Rav at all. So Tashma, effort number 3. So
When you say 32 by 32, does that mean the length of each of the sides was 32?
correct. The
Or
length
not
of
the
the,
area?
no, not the area, the length of each side. So now effort number 3, Tashma. Now this effort, we have to understand this is going to be is a reference to the Gemara in about a week. It's next Shabbos' staff that on Daf Samach Bet Amud Aleph that it's going to talk about the following. So let me give a background and then we'll go see it inside. The ramp of the Mizbeach was 32 amos from the beginning of the ramp until you got to the Mizbeach. And we just saw that the Mizbeach itself was 32 amos. Now, the combination of the ramp and the Mizbeach, it was not 64. Now, that would be 32 plus 32 would be 64. That would be what you think it would be. But it was not 32 plus 32 equals 64. It was 62. And why was it 62? Because the ramp continued to go up in elevation even after it crossed over and was on top of the base and on top of um, the ledge that was around. So there was a 1 amma base, a 1 amma ledge. You eliminate that duplication because the ramp went over that space, and that's how you end up with 62 amos for the entire length. So that's what the Gemara is going to be discussing. And so let's see how this again challenges Rav and seems to support Levi. So
Well, was
Tashma,
there something on the other side of that ramp so they wouldn't trip when they got down? Because it's supposedly they would be maybe as much as 2 amot into the air, and you have to step down onto the mizbeach itself, right? If you needed to go on the roof of the mizbeach.
no, the ramp ended at the roof of the Mizbeach, at least according to the diagram that I have here. The ramp ended at the roof of the Mizbeach. The issue is that the beneath that the ledge that you would use to walk around the Mizbeach was 4 amos, no, 3 amos beneath the uh, the flat surface of the Mizbeach. So there was a separate ramp that would take you from the main ramp to the ledge. So that's how the Mizbeach was structured. So, but the bottom line is that again, so
Oh,
Tashma,
okay.
all right, so
So
Tashma,
there's a connection. Okay, so that
there was a connection, correct.
oh, so there would have been. Otherwise, I was thinking this ramp goes over the side of the mizbeach, so there'd be about 2 amas in the air. They have to step
No,
down,
no,
but so there's
no.
there's a piece in between them, the ramp and
Correct.
the mizbeach.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So Tashma. So we say Nimsa Porea Ama al Yisod, the Ama al Sovev. So why was it not 32 plus 32 equals 64, but 32 plus 32 equals 62? It was because the ramp went one over the base and 1 amma was over the ledge. And both of those amot counted to essentially both the altar size and the ramp size. And so you have to eliminate that double counting. But what's the implication? The implication is that the ramp went over the base. So and so doesn't that show that there was a base on the southern side? And the answer is no. Ema kineged ama yesod val ama sovev. No, it was corresponding to the base, meaning there was a base somewhere on the south side, namely on the southwestern corner. There was a base, and it didn't go literally over it, but it went by it. And of course, by it was, you know, going BYIT, by it was going to cause it to double count that space also. And so it went by the amma of the base and over the amma of the ledge. And so as a result, it doesn't mean that it went over the base literally. It was just an elimination of the double counting. So that also is not going to contradict Rab. It's not going to be a problem. So our final challenge. Tashma Ditani Levi. Levi taught the following brisa. Now, even though Levi taught it and he's arguing with Rav, where we don't want this brisa to contradict Rav if we can avoid it. So, Ketzad Bonin Es HaMizbeach. How did they build the altar? So, Mevian Malbain, they would bring a form. Shehu Shloshim Ushtayim Al Shloshim Ushtayim. That was 32 amos by 32 amos. You see this today when people construct cement sidewalks, right? There's a wooden form that aligns where the sidewalk is going to be poured. And so essentially, they have a form where you're going to fill in everything, and that's going to be the Mizbeach. But we're going to do it in stages because there are three, one, two, three, four different elements that we need because the base is 32 by 32, but then the space of the altar that goes up and is and serves as the ledge is 30 by 30, and the place above that is 28 by 28. So we're going to need like a wedding cake. Imagine a wedding cake, right? Where you have the outer circle at the base, then an inner circle, and then a smaller circle at the top. So that's what we're dealing with. So we're going to have this outer square. The Tani Levi, Ketzad Bonin Es HaMizbeach. How do they build it? Mevian Malbin. They bring this form. Shehu Shloshim Shtayim Al Shloshim Shtayim. That's 32 by 32 amot. The Gova Amma, and it's 1 amma high. Umevi chaluke avanim mufulamos. They would bring over smooth damp stones. The damp stones were because the stones would need to be very, very smooth to ensure that there was no jutting or possibility of catching anything on them. Bein gedolos, bein katanos, small ones and large ones and small ones. Maybe sid, vicunya visefes. And you would then take lime, this lead glaze and tar, umamche v'shofech, and you would put it all together and pour it into this mixture, into the form. Is again very much like imagining a cement fixture. V'zehu yisod, and that would be the base. V'chozer umevi malbein, and then you'd bring another form after that has solidified. Shehu shloshim amma al shloshim amma. That's 30 amos by 30 amos, and you center it in the 32 by 32, so that there is 1 amma on every side that extends out. The gova chamesh amot, and that goes up 5 amot because again the ledge is 6 amos high. Umevi chaluke avanim, and you would do the exact same thing. Bring the smooth stones. V'chozer umevi malbein shehu kavchet or kavchet amot, and then you would have the third form, which v'gova gimel amot, that was 3 amos tall and a 28 by 28 square, and it also would go in the center, and that would create the ledge, a 1 amma ledge, 6 amos high. Now that brings us to a height of 9 amos, umevi chaluke, and then again you bring the smooth stones, and everything else it happens the same way. V'humakom maraka, and that would be the top of that would be where you would put the all the wood that would be burned. The chozer umevi malbein shehu amma al amma, and then you would take a form that is 1 amma by 1 amma, umevi chaluke avanim umufulamos, and you would bring the smooth stones, bein gedolos, bein katanos. Now we give the details again, whether they're big or small. Umevi zefes v'kunya umamche v'shofek, and you would bring the tar and the glaze and the lime, and you would and you would pour the whole thing over the stones. Vizeo Karen, and that would be the horn. That would be the horn. V'chein l'kol Karen b'Karen, and you would do that same amma by amma in each of the four corners. So now, how is this a problem for Rav? V'chi tema degayezle. Well, and if you want to say, well, the problem is that we said that the base was a 32 by 32 square. So that implies that there was a base in the southeastern corner. So, if you want to say, well, they cut it away. As we turn to Nudal and Mabet, that they cut away that part of it. Avanim shleimus ksiv. The Torah tells us that we need to have smooth stones. It says in Dvarim Kav Zayin Pasuk Vav. So as a result, it can't be that. And so how do we answer this? So we answer it as follows: Demachis midi mituse v'shakilei. No, what it was that they did bring that form, but they put something in its place to avoid it being filled. So they had essentially an amma by 30 amma thing that would go along the south side, and then I guess double counting a little bit, but similarly on the eastern side, and that would prevent anything being poured from creating a base in the on the full south side and on the full east side. And so that's how they did it. And so as a result, it's not going to be a problem for Rav. And to Elo Temahaki. And because if you don't say that, you know what? There's a statement by Rav Kahana that shows that that's how we handled another aspect of the Mizbeach. Because Hada Amar Rav Kahana, Avanim Shel Karnanos Chalulos Hayu, that the horns of the Mizbeach actually were hollow and had the ability to hold content. Diksiv, because we have a pasuk. This is a pasuk in Zechariah where it talks about something being filled and analogizes it to the corners of the altar. Umalu, and they filled the bowl, kimizrak, like a bowl, kizaviyot mizbeach, just like the corners of the altar. So that implies that the corners of the altar had volume that it could hold. But we just learned the process. But so as a result, how was it possible? How do you align the process that we just said, that you fill in this amma by amma cube, and that's how you create the corner, with the fact that there's supposed to be space within it to hold something? So hachinami avanim shalemos amarachmana, and you can't say it was cut out because you need whole stones. But rather it must be that there was something that was put inside in order to prevent it from creating a problem, in order to ensure that it had space, in order to ensure that it did not that it had space to hold something. Hakanami, and so as a result, so too with respect to the base, the machas midi mituse the shakale. Again, there was something there that was put into the form in order to prevent the form from taking up the full 32 amos by 32 amos, and that's exactly how it was handled. So now the Gemara teaches how we chose the location for Yerushalayim.
How did we have the 32 that's the Yesod, right? And then above that we have a 5 and with the 30 by 30, and then there's
correct
20. So all that foundation, that's the 32, that's filled in stone, right? That is stone. That's sitting on top of the 32 by 32, right?
Yes, every one of the layers of the cake of the mizbeach were created the same way. You brought in stones that were smooth and whole, and then the airspace between those stones was filled with a lime glazed tar mixture, and in order so that it would take up and be sort of like a perfect square.
Oh,
Obviously, according to Levi, it was a perfect square. According to Rav, there were two corners that were there. There was two lines that were effectively cut out by putting in another form to prevent it from becoming a perfect square.
I don't quite follow that, but no, it's not
Right?
that.
No, look,
I
the
don't know if it's
point
that
is
important.
look at the picture on the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Bet. Okay, the
Okay.
picture, all right? So imagine a square that is 32 by 32. But we need to create, which is going to be the full Yesod, where it says Yesod bin Yamin, and then it says Yehuda and Yehuda. It's going to, that 32 by 32 is going to include a being an entire square. But you can see that according to Rav, there was nothing in the two places that it said Yehuda. So how did they create that? According to Rav, they put something else in to the square, into the 32 by 32 square, to prevent any of the rock glaze mixture from going into the space where it says Yehuda.
I see. Put something in to create like a space there, right?
Exactly. A spacer. Exactly.
A
That's exactly
spacer.
right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean,
And
that's
now,
exactly what you do with cement in order to create, on a sidewalk, you have spacers in there to allow for the expansion and contraction. And you
right.
and that's the exact same thing that we're talking. I mean, not, obviously, it's not for the expansion and contraction in this case, but that's the same idea that we're talking about here.
Okay, so now just to clarify, we said the ramp was 32, but it didn't quite reach the gog there.
No, no, it reached
there was
it reached
another
the
piece. There was a connecting piece, right?
no, no. It reached the Gog. It was 32 amos long, and it from the beginning to the end, it gave a rise of 9 amos to get to the very top of the flat part of the Mizbeach. It didn't rise to the level of the corners, so there was a 1 amma high corner in each of the four corners that
Right, that's
was,
right.
but it went all the way to the 9 amos. But then you would have from the ramp a downward sloping ramp that would take you from the ramp to the ledge, to the Saviv, that was 6 amos high. So it would have to go down. Now, depending on exactly where the ledge started, where the second ramp began, you can imagine that it could be either flat or going down. Again, depending on exactly where that second ramp started. But there was a second ramp that would take you to the 6 amma high ledge. But the main ramp would take you directly to the flat surface of the Mizbeach. So that way you could bring the animals pieces all the way to the top of the Mizbeach and put them onto the altar.
But if there was another space there, like another small ramp, wouldn't that just be 30? I mean, sorry, two amos in two amot in length, right? So that from the this would be
No, not
32, and then you have
necessarily. Not
another
necessarily.
two to make.
It depends on where it started off. It would be an off ramp essentially. It's literally the first off ramp that we ever that ever existed. It was an off ramp that would allow you, instead of going all the way up to the altar, to go to the Saviv. And so it didn't. There was no specific length to it. We haven't yet really fully discussed it, but God willing, hopefully at some point we'll see more details about it. But now we're going to get to the question of how did we choose this location? So Darash Rava. So again, we're talking about Yerushalayim, so we're going to see some of this detail, and you'll see that the detail incorporates the juxtaposition of Yehuda and Binyamin, and that's a big piece as to why this is here. And also, we cited the language of Ben Kasefav Shachain, that God dwells between the shoulders, and so that's going to also play a part. So Darash Rava had the following drasha. My dixiv, when it says, and this is not actually a quote, but rather a combination of two psukim in Shmuel Aleph, Perek Yud Tet, Pasuk Yud Chet, and Yud Tet. It says Vayelech hu ushmuel v'yeshvu Benayot Birama, that he and Shmuel, David, went and with Shmuel, and they stayed in Nayot Ramah. Now the problem is Nayot Ramah is not a single location. V'chima inyan Nayot Eitzel Ramah. Those seem to be two different places. Ella Shahayu Yoshin Barama. They were in Ramah, namely that's where Shmuel was. The Oskin Benoyo Shel Olam, and they were working to figure out and how to beautify the world, right? Noyo and Nayot are very similar words, and so that's the idea. Amre, what did they say? Siv the Kamtavel Makom, that when it comes to the pasuk in Dvarim Perak Yud Zayin pasuk Chet that says you're going to go up and go to the place of Hashem that Hashem's going to choose, Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem. So Milamid Shebeis Hamikdash Gavoa Mikol Eretz Yisrael. The Beis Hamikdash needs to be higher than the rest of Israel. The Eretz Yisrael Gavoa Mikol Artzos. Now that isn't proven here, but that's what they were saying because of course Israel is higher than all the other lands, at least from a spiritual perspective. So Lo Havu Yade. But they didn't know where was this place that is higher in Israel than any other where else. So Aisu Sefer Yeshua. They brought the Sefer of Yeshua, and what does it say? Bekul Hoksiv. Always, whenever it's talking about the borders of the various tribes, it says Vayered Hagavul v'Ta'ar Hagavul, that the border descended or the border turned. But there's one exception. B'Shevet Binyamin ve'alaktiv. When it comes to the Shevet of Binyamin, it says that it went up. And so the Yared Loksiv, and it doesn't say that it descended. So Amre, so that's why David and Shmuel said jointly that Shma Mina Hakahu Mekomo. That must be the place for the Beit Hamikdash. Savar lemivne be'ein etam demidle. That they thought originally to put it in Ein Etam, which is the highest point. Amri, but they said, Nisete Be Kalil. We have to lower it a little bit. Dixiv, Ubein Ksefav Shachain, that it needs to be between the shoulders. And the shoulders are lower than the head. And so as a result, we're going to put the Yerushalayim not quite at the highest point, but right next to Ein Etam, and that's Yerushalayim. Or maybe they came to the conclusion not based on the pasuk of Ben Ksefav Shachain on that front, but they came to the conclusion from a different perspective. Gemiri de Sanhedrin Mechelko de Yehuda. We know that the Sanhedrin is supposed to be in Yehuda. Ushchina Bechelko de Binyamin. And we know that the Kodesh HaKodashim is going to be in Binyamin. Ve'imid dalinan lei. Now, if we go all the way up and put it in Ein Etam, Mispelig Tuva, that's going to be separate. And we want the Sanhedrin to be next to the Beis Hamikdash. So mutav denisati be porta kediksev uben ksefav shachain. So as a result, let's move it to the place that's a little lower, and using the basis of ben ksefav shachain, that he's resting between the shoulders, and so that's how they ended up with the location being in Yerushalayim. And the fact that David was able to figure out the right location created a tremendous sense of jealousy by Doeg Adomi. Kidiksiv, how do I know that? Because it says, Kikin as beischa achalasni, that the envy that was associated with your house, the way we're understanding it is that I, David, who's speaking, this is from Tehillim, Samech Tet Pasuk Yud, that the envy of your house, of the fact that I was able to figure out where your house is located, achalasni, that it devoured me. It was the thing that was causing Doeg Hadomi to be jealous of me. Uksiv, and we also have another pasuk, Zachor Hashem LeDavid es kol ad unoso asher nishba Hashem, that remember Hashem that all of David's afflictions, how he swore to Hashem and vowed, and then the psukim continued. Im avo ba'ol beiti, im etain shnas, and contain pasuk. This is not like a direct quote, but various pieces of the various psukim. This is all um, uh, uh, from Tehillim, Perek Kuf Lamed Bet, Psukim Aleph to Vav. Uh, and the idea is that imavoba oel beiti. If I'm going to go, David is saying, if I'm going to go to my own house, imetain shenes le'enai. If I'm going to get sleep, la'afapai, for my eyes, tnuma ad emsa. Makom ad emtsa makom Lashem, until I find a place for Hashem. Meaning, the emphasis is about how he was afflicted as a result of his effort to find a place for Hashem. Hine shema'anuha be'efrasa mitzanua b'steyar. And we heard of it in Ephrasa, and we found it in a forested field. So how does that connect to and show that the whole story that we just highlighted, right? The whole point is Rava was doing a drasha to say all of this. So this is the drasha. What does it mean, be'efrasa? Ze Yoshua de Ka'asim Ephraim. That it's referring to Yoshua. So he needed to look in Sefer Yoshua to find the source for how he knew where Yerushalayim would be. And Mitzanua b'Sidei Ya'ar, and he found it in the field. And what animal goes in a field? Ze Binyamin, Diksiv, Binyamin Ze'ev Yitra. Binyamin is like a wolf that will tear. And so as a result, that's the conclusion. Let's since we started a few minutes late, let's do the next Mishnah, and that way we'll begin literally at the top of Nun Hey and Aleph, God willing, tomorrow. So again, the Mishnah continues with the remaining Kodshei Kodashim. Zivchei Shalmei Tzibur va'ashamos, that those are the Shlomim offerings and the Asham offerings. Now, the Shlomim offerings are explicit in the Torah, so but Elu Hein Ashamos. Here are the Asham offerings. Asham Gzelos, that's when you swear for something that you don't have it in your possession, and in fact you're lying and you do. Asham Me'ilos, if you engage in Me'ilah using some of the Hektish property without realizing it, so then that's Me'ilah and you bring an Asham. Asham Shivcha Charufa, if you have relations with a betrothed maidservant. According, Rashi cites one opinion here that it's talking about a situation where a maidservant, a non-Jewish maidservant, a non-Jewish slave, was set aside for a Jewish slave. But the other opinion is that they were dealing with somebody that is half free, half slave, and they were engaged to marry. So Asham Nazir, or an Asham that was done by a Nazir who became Tameh. Asham Mitzora, the Asham that a Mitzora brings when he becomes Tahor. Asham Talui, and then the Asham that you bring if you're unsure whether or not you did a particular sin. So what's the law associated with all of these, including the Shlamim? Shchitasam b'tzafon. They're all slaughtered in the north. V'kibul damam b'chli shareis b'tzafon. And again, the blood needs to be received in a special vessel in the north. And there are two blood applications on the altar that are consistent of effectively four applications. Again, we saw over the yesterday the machlokus about that, whether it's each application is one application that ends up being like a form of a gamma because you splash it on the corner itself, or is it two separate applications on the two sides of the corner? That was the machlokas that we saw yesterday, so that presumably would apply here as well. And they are eaten within the courtyard, within the curtains, and again, that's the same. That's just the version of the Azara as per the Mishkan. L'zichrei kuna, it's eaten by male kohanim. L'kol machal, it's prepared in any manner. L'yom v'layla ad chatzot. And again, day, that the rest of that day, and that night until midnight. So that is the end of the Mishnah. That brings us to the Gemara, and for that you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Look forward to continuing
If I
learning.
could, I just want to clarify this
Sure.
confusion. I'm still thinking about this. We say that um the total length of the kevis and the mizbeach is 62 and not 64.
That's
So
correct.
so I'm still having some conceptual difficulty in understanding where those two missing
Okay,
amot are.
so the way to think about it is the following. The ramp goes literally over the ledge, right? The ledge, which is 6 amos high, is the 1 amma thick ledge that is 6 amos high. The ramp goes all the way over it in order to actually touch the top, the flat top surface of the mizbeach. So it
Okay.
literally covers the 1 amma ramp, the 1 amma ledge.
The
And
ledge
so
that
that
protrudes,
Yes, the ledge protrudes because
one
remember
arm.
it protrudes 1 amma. That's why there's the base is 32 by 32. Then there's 30 by 30, and then there's
Right,
28 by 28. Well, the
right,
ledge is the 30 by 30 part. Now,
right.
the 32 by 32 part is is also literally covered by by the ramp.
Ramp.
The ramp goes again. The ramp go does not end at the beginning of the base. It continues past the base over over the ledge until you get to the literal limit of the mizbeach. So
So
that
that's
you
32.
and so that's how it comes. It's 32, and those two of those amos are considered part of the are part of both the ramp and the mizbeach.
Uh-huh.
There's a nice picture here I could show you from the R scroll so that you have maybe have a better sense from it.
So
So
those two amot from the Mizbeach are underneath there. They're covered by the ramp. So those are two that are extending, those extensions.
correct, correct.
Right,
So
okay.
here, right? So you see right over here, you can see that there's two amot that are covered that
Right.
are by both the ramp and the mizbeach.
Right. It's difficult. I don't have I do not have Art Scroll, but yeah, it's a small, but I get the idea. Okay.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the concept. So, but the point is that's how it covers both directions.
Oh, so then we're essentially subtracting those two
Exactly. Exactly. You have to
from the
subtract
ramp
those two because it's
from the
otherwise you're double counting that space.
okay, all right. All right.
All right. Awesome. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Shabbat
Looking forward to
shalom.
continuing our learning together.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.